What's up guys, it's me Lori, aka Loretta Chow, founder of thesexreporter.com. So the exposure of people like Harvey Weinstein, Charlie Rose, and Louis C.K. and others as sexual predators has been one of the greatest things to happen all year. Now it doesn't feel like a great thing, obviously, because we're reading about these horrible, traumatic events that people have been living with for their entire careers and their lifetimes. But I say it's great because what this signals is a calling out of a culture that we've allowed to go on for so long. The thing is, I think the takeaway from everything that we've learned hasn't been clear-cut enough, and I think can be a little confusing. So today I want to talk about some of the common conversations that come up around Me Too and around all of these scandals and discuss them a little bit more. So one of the most common reactions I think to every article that comes out is reading all these gory details and being like, who are these people? Who does this? This is crazy. But I think looking at story after story of more people coming out and being exposed for doing these things, the answer is pretty clear that many people do this. In fact, some of you might have done it in your past and not even realized it. I think what often happens is that we have this natural human reaction to latch on to the craziest aspects of some of these stories, like the most outlandish details that we see in them, and to immediately think these people are deviant, sexual predators. They're nothing like normal people. They're nothing like us. But that completely misses the point. To me, the point is that people become these outlandish, deviant sexual predators because they live in a culture and in a society that has allowed them to do a whole bunch of mundane, disrespectful shit. It's like the more they did without consequences, the bolder they got to do worse things until it got so bad that their victims thought, okay, this is so crazy, surely no one is going to challenge me on this and everyone will think this guy is crazy. And maybe eventually, decades later, it'll end up on the cover of the New York Times. But do those crazy things at the end of that storyline make the earlier violations any less wrong? No. In some ways, those earlier, lesser, more mundane violations can be worse because they're the types of things that people will challenge victims on, and they're the types of things that will cause a person to have self-doubt for an entire lifetime. The other very common conversation I hear is, yeah, but why didn't these women report it? I think that people are now past the whole, like, maybe it's not true because they didn't report it, but people are still wondering, like, why the heck is it that women aren't directly just running to the police or running to the higher ups and saying something about this? And this follows on my previous point, which is that the vast majority of sexual violations that are going on are not things that are clear-cut cases of like an evil monster versus a sad innocent victim. If these hashtag Me Too stories are telling us anything, especially those that are not coming from celebrities, it's that many women are experiencing these things but never speak up because they don't feel innocent enough to be worthy of sympathy, or they don't feel like their perpetrators are evil enough to be a story or to be worth telling anyone about. In many cases, some of these stories come out and you read them and they sound kind of crazy, but you can also see that this has been going on for a long time and in a lot of contexts may even be excusable. So at a certain point, the victims don't even really realize that they're victims until later on and they hear other people talk about it and why, you know what, maybe their rights were violated. But this gets into tricky territory though, because I've had things happen to me, which I wrote about in my own Me Too piece on my website, and those things could have been considered sexual harassment or sexual assault. I argued for years that these things were not worth talking about because I personally wasn't traumatized. I didn't want to diminish the experience of other people who had maybe worse things happen to them, so I didn't feel like drawing attention to my own experience. I'm not arguing now that I should be retroactively traumatized because I'm not. I'm fine. But what I think now is that I was wrong about being silent, because in being silent, I was doing a disservice to other victims who might have had the same thing happen to them. Just because I cope with something very easily doesn't mean that other people aren't suffering from trauma from having the exact same thing happen to them. And just because I'm okay doesn't mean that those things that other people did to me, no matter how minor or mundane they are any less horrible. I guess what I'm saying is that what I realized was, you know what? I have dismissed this for too long because those people were assholes and they should be called out on it because my strength is not your excuse. So when it comes to these exposures, especially when it comes to people who are like very beloved within their industry, like Charlie Rose, you hear a lot of reactions that are like, oh my God, even him? When is this gonna stop? Who's gonna be next? As a person in the news business, I sort of understand like the feeling of being on the edge of your seat and wondering who the next big name is that's gonna drop. But I think this also misses the point. All these awesome reporters are busy exposing a culture that's widespread, not the exception. As more and more people get called out, there's a big picture point here, and that point is that this is happening everywhere. It's not about which next big name it is, it's about all the big names. And whoever isn't being called out in whatever industry doesn't mean that industry is devoid of sexual misconduct. It's probably because it's just a matter of time before people feel comfortable enough to come forward and call them out too. Why? Because we're talking about a culture that's pervasive in our entire society, not just in a specific industry. I don't know how many more people in different positions or different industries need to be exposed before people finally realize this. This isn't a condemnation of Hollywood. This is a condemnation of a sick culture that we have accepted and hidden for a long time across all industries. And there's another thing that sort of irks me when people talk about, these precious celebrities that, who would have thought that this person would have done something like this? It's that we have this natural human instinct to define an entire person by their most prominent trait. And that goes both ways, for the positive and the negative. Just because a person is brilliant or talented or very well liked in certain circles doesn't mean that that person is incapable of doing horrible things or having horrible opinions. And just because a person has done horrible things doesn't mean that their existence in society has literally had no contribution whatsoever. That's why I think people get very upset when they find out that someone they thought was good is actually bad, or someone they thought was bad is actually human, because they can't reconcile in their brains that, these two different versions of a person can actually be one and the same. And that clouds our judgment when it comes to actually evaluating what we're supposed to do or how we're supposed to treat that person. It's debatable whether a person has done something so bad that it actually negates all of the positive things that they've done. But we basically have to stop being so shocked that people who are very talented or very intelligent are capable of being sexual assailants, because that type of thinking protects dangerous people. It gives us this false sense of security in assuming that just because someone is good at one thing, it means they're a good person through and through. It's also overly simple and inaccurate. People are complex, they're multifaceted, and the sad truth is some of the most influential people in history have been people who have a dark side. I don't think that behavior should be permitted. I think that the behavior itself needs to be addressed, and so should the culture around it and the environment around it that allows it to happen, because that's the kind of stuff that we can and we should change. It's the kind of stuff that we have control over. It's not wrong to fire and punish these people, because it needs to be shown that we won't tolerate this kind of behavior. But for the sake of understanding this behavior and really addressing it and fixing the problem, we need to stop negating every single thing a person has accomplished in their lifetime if they have accomplished something or contributed something to society. Lastly, a common conversation that I also hear is that these men and all the things that they did are just proof that all gendered advances are bad and no one should ever hit on anyone else in any setting because it's all harassment. This is one of those arguments where I'm not really sure if a lot of people actually feel that way, or if people are feeling that other people feel that way because they're afraid that these allegations are going to start spilling over into incidents that maybe aren't really harassment or lie in a gray area. But there are some people who do make this argument, and there is an understandable history behind the argument. That history is that women have been objectified for so long that the only way to negate the effects of that objectification is to not see them as women anymore and to respect them as complete equals, as if they are not different than men. Part of that, obviously, is not seeing women as objects of sexual desire. The issue that I have with this argument is that it conflates different issues. On one hand, of course, men should not objectify women. No one should be seen as an object. We are all human. That is a serious problem we need to fix if we want to be equally respected. But straight men should not and probably won't ever stop sexually desiring women. It's just a biological fact. There's nothing inherently wrong with people being attracted to other people. There's also no way for a person to know whether or not their advance is wanted unless they actually try and the other person doesn't say yes. What is wrong though, which I think is a separate issue, is the fact that a lot of people don't respect other people's autonomy and their right to draw their own boundaries. What's wrong is that because people don't respect those boundaries, a lot of women and some men feel uncomfortable just declining those sexual advances. And for those of you who are unaware, the truth is a lot of women face harassment, whether it's verbal abuse or violent retaliation, just for saying no. The other thing that's wrong is that we have a serious lack of understanding on what consent is, and we assume that people are supposed to know. As much as people just want to write it off as being nuts, there are many men out there who actually think that a woman is asking for it because she's dressing provocatively. We laugh and think it's crazy, but Those guys who thought that it was okay to just whip their dick out because the girls didn't immediately call 911 and that was okay, that is an opinion that also exists in some circles. And of course, the other big problem we have is that we allow people with influence and authority to get away with these things without punishment and without calling them out. So if you take all of these actual problems away and you're just looking at one person who's attracted to another person, there's nothing wrong with that. It's all that other stuff that's fucked up. If no one ever had to fear retaliation for just shutting an advance down, then it wouldn't be a big deal to just say no. And if everyone respected each other's right to say no, then people would move on without any hard feelings or bruised egos. And hey, if both parties say yes, that could actually be a beautiful thing. Even in the workplace, there have been workplace romances that have turned into great relationships. So long as the relationship isn't abused and both parties consent enthusiastically, it should all be good. Thanks for watching this, guys. I would really love to know what you think, whether in the comments below or just hit me up on Twitter at Loretta Chow. But I really wanted to do a whole video just on these various subjects, and I know it was long, but I just feel like they really deserve more discussion, and I hope that after all of these things have come out and this has run its course, that we don't forget and that we educate the next generation to be better. For those of you who are new to the channel, I'm Loretta Chow, a former Wall Street Journal reporter, trying out this YouTube thing, and I also founded a website called thesexreporter.com, which is an independent website that's self-funded and it's for sex-positive journalism. If you want to check it out, go ahead. It basically covers everything from education to health and science, business and technology, or culture stuff related to sex, and it features work by me as well as others. And you can support in a variety of ways. One is just by subscribing. Another is to follow me on all the various social media, and you can also shop my Amazon store, which I've actually now loaded with a bunch of cool stuff that you might want to consider as a gift guide now that the holidays are coming up. I do include some really fun things that either that I've written about or really cool books that I think are really worth reading in the realm of sex. Also for fun, I've started a new podcast called Insatiable with my friend Smiley, who's a former fashion and lifestyle editor at XXL. And the podcast is just fun. We get together every week and we talk about anything related to sex, dating, and relationships. It's not journalistic, but it's sort of just, you know, it's keeping the conversation going. And we have really fun call-ins with people and conversations about various topics. You can find that in iTunes or Google Play or anywhere that you like to download podcasts. Also, I have Patreon, which you can contribute to for as little as $1 a month. And what I do with my patrons is that I'll send some private updates and stuff that's going on with the site and with the channel, and there's just like some interaction. It's another opportunity for us to interact. I really hope that I'll hear from you guys, and otherwise I will see you next time.